Hi, my name is Kim Kahn. I'm going to try this again because I figured out last time I didn't have both the window and the webcam on, so we'll see how this goes. I teach technology education at Martin Milan Middle School in the Lampeter-Strasburg School District. I've taught tech ed in Lancaster County for about the past 33 years, which is hard to believe. The last 16 have been at Martin Milan teaching grades 6, 7, and 8. Outside of school, I have 3 sons, Kyle, Jesse, and Kevin. Kyle and Kevin are twins. They're 23 years old. Kyle's a Penn State graduate and is working through the process of becoming a police officer, and Kevin is a successful real estate agent. My youngest son, Jesse, is going to school at Utah State University. He's studying mechanical engineering with a concentration in aviation. My son Kyle is also a proud member of the Army Reserves. And Jesse's supposed to be studying engineering, but he may also be studying off-roading and having fun. He's having a wonderful time in Logan, Utah. Outside of school and work, I like to travel with my family. We've been camping in most of the national parks. We've spent backcountry time in many of them. I also have had the privilege of coordinating a number of educational travel trips with the students at Martin Milan and Lampeter-Strasburg High School. These pictures were taken at the Teton Science School, a place we've gone to study all kinds of things from alpine ecology to moose habitat restoration and climate change using pika as a indicator species to help us track that. And also at the Pigeon Key Marine Science School in the Florida Keys. Here we study marine biology, coastal ecology, and anything related to the environment in the water. And on a more local opportunity, I've also helped with programming for kids at a marine science weekend that we do at Cape Henlopen State Park in Delaware. I also enjoy skiing, and I've been lucky to be able to chaperone the Lampeter-Strasburg Ski Club for the past couple of years. For me, Jan Chappius' 7 Strategies of Assessment of Learning began with the question, is formative assessment an instrument or a process? And then it goes on to talk about what gives a learner the power to actually learn. Excuse me. For an assessment to be formative, it has to lead to some kind of action that improves learning. It may lead to an action on the part of the learner, an action on the part of the teacher, but preferably an action on part of both of them. For maximum impact, there has to be an alignment between the formative assessment and the instruction. So there is a diagnostic feedback that results in using time wisely and to make progress towards a specific goal. In the introduction, I was impacted by the conversation about the dynamic where the formative assessment stays completely in control of the teacher, and the description of that as benching the student. That's something that I feel strongly about, and it's clear to me that for maximum learning gain, the student has got to be invested in both the process and the outcome. The beginning of the 7 strategies for assessment starts with the question, where am I going? It's like starting at the outcomes, at the end, and then creating a vision backwards of what needs to be done to get there. Once the objective is understood, it allows the teacher and the learner to sit down and draw that map together. Using examples of what's expected, of giving the learner the concept of exactly what they're working towards or what their progress shouldn't look like, helps prevent any miscommunication or misunderstanding on the part of the learner. The clear vision of the target as part of this process enables the student to know where they need to go, and the concept of modeling both strong examples and weak examples also enable the student to have a clearer picture. Answering the question where I am now is an important part of formative assessments. The learner has to be invested in figuring out exactly what building blocks are already mastered, so it can be defined which building blocks need to be added to the wall, so to speak. Regular feedback from the teacher to the learner and regular self-assessment on the part of the learner are critical to helping the learner not only understand where he or she is at the beginning of the process, but then also to understand where they are throughout the process and how close they are to achieving their goals. Answering the question, how can I close the gap, is where the feedback loop is important. Regular checks for understanding and then using those gaps in understanding to guide future instruction is important. It is important to use evidence of needs to determine the next step. It's important to make sure the instruction is focused on achieving those specific goals. And it's a really good opportunity for students to track and reflect and share what they've learned up to that point. The idea of learning orientation and the question, what is the goal to get better, really spoke to me. I think it's really important that kids believe that their effort is going to lead to success and also have a sense that they're incrementally moving in the right direction. My very favorite point is the idea of a failure tolerance. In fact, I'm not sure I even like the word failure. In my class, we do a lot of problem solving, a lot of design, a lot of brainstorming, and it's really important that learning is all about making mistakes. You know, we have a saying, if you aren't making a mistake, you're not learning, you're not participating. Mistakes are an important part of the process for us, and it takes a while for students to get comfortable with that. It's important that students get comfortable with their mistakes and get confident in their ability to make mistakes and to learn from them and to improve from them. I love the quote from the video and will use it myself. It's a good day to be wrong, because it is a good day to be wrong, especially when you take what's wrong about whatever you've done and learn from it. The idea of making sure to allow enough time for quality practice also really spoke to me. Teachers are so short on time and so long on goals, and it's a constant struggle and balance between the two. Careful planning and carefully planning informative, relevant formative assessments is crucial to using that time wisely and also to make sure that there is enough time for that valuable practice. In Gupta's article, Assessment for Learning, one of the first things mentioned is the potential for testing to become a drudgery, and there was a recognition of the contrast between the endless summative assessments and the idea of a formative assessment, not just as an assessment, but as a learning experience itself. Performance-based assessments, or PBAs, allow students to define their own path towards learning. I kind of saw it as a roadmap towards the outcome. As a teacher of technology education in a class where we do a lot of open-ended problem solving, integrating things that we've learned in the past, what I do struck me as very similar to what Gupta was referring to in the article. Starting with the teacher, who provides some background information, some food for thought, so to speak. Students are allowed to explore their idea for how to solve a problem, to create a hypothesis, and then to test it. The feedback loop in this process is really important because it involves the students and members of the students' groups. I was under the impression at this point that it doesn't really involve the teacher, and I think that's important. It puts that feedback element into the hands of the students and into the hands of their classmates. Time is provided to allow testing of the hypothesis and reporting on the findings, and oral presentation on the methodology that they used to solve the problem that was put in front of them really reinforces the learning, both in the process of making the presentation and then also in the process of listening to the presentations of other people that were in the class. Self-correction was able to take place throughout, so as a different idea came up, kids were actually able to process that and learn from it. Learner engagement and that meaningful feedback loop were essential components in Gupta's Assessment for Learning article. I love the student quote about being nervous and excited at the same time when the student found out that they would be using formative assessments in their AP chemistry class. By focusing on the formative part, maybe de-emphasizing the assessment part, the students were able to embrace the potential for a more authentic, creative, engaged learning experience where the assessment itself and the process of the assessment becomes very much part of the end result, the learning process itself. In comparing the two articles, Gupta echoes Chappius's notion, stressing that students need to be engaged in the process. They also agree for the need for a meaningful feedback loop, as well as a modeling of what the expectation should be. The factor of time is dealt with slightly differently between the two. While Chappius acknowledges that it's important to make sure that there's enough time for quality practice, Gupta lays out a really, really specific time frame, really specific strategy for using time to encourage focus and movement forward to make sure that they get the maximum bang for their buck. There's kind of a fine line between using time to motivate students and using time and resulting in time that's stressful for students. So that's definitely a skill that needs to be gauged by the teacher in the classroom. In my experience, that balance can be difficult to find, and it's really, really important and critical to the success of both the formative assessment and ultimately the summative assessment at the end. As a technology education teacher, I've been using what is essentially a performance-based assessment for 3 decades. We didn't call it that, but that is essentially what it was. Students have been given a specific set of background skills, basic information, a problem to solve, and then working either individually or sometimes as groups, using those skills and those tools to kind of experiment their way through a problem, learning about the process as they go. So I found that I was most closely aligned with what Gupta had to say. I see my 6th grade kids one time for an hour every 12 days. I see my 7th grade kids one time every 6 days for an hour. And I see my 8th grade kids 5 times every 12 days for an hour. It's really, really important for me that assessment is performance-based, and that assessment is also part of the experience. If we spend too much time assessing students, then they lose out on the actual experience that we're trying to deliver. So we've always done that, and it's really, really important. I especially appreciated the time schedule that Gupta laid out with the purpose of motivating kids and keeping them focused and keeping them on track.